Welcome back to Beers and Wrenches. I hope y'all been having a wonderful time. Today we're getting into the NA Miata, and we're going to be starting to make more power like I had suggested in the last video. We've already started disassembling the car yesterday, so you'll see that after this. But we do have a Skunk 2 intake manifold with a Skunk 2 64mm throttle body, and as well we have a Mega Squirt Pro 2 plug and play for the 96 and 97. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to start walking through some of this. We'll go back to yesterday's part so I can show you the initial teardown and everything like that. But we're going to get into this, and I appreciate everyone that's viewing. If you wouldn't mind, leave a comment, like, subscribe, share it, do anything. I appreciate everything y'all do, and I hope to see y'all when we make power.
96 to 97 Skunk 2 throttle body. It is 64mm compared to the stock 57, so that's a good increase. And I'm aware that the spring does stick sometimes, and if I do run into that, I'll release some spring tension. You have your side gear right here, which will be in this bag right here, and you'll just line the gear up basically with one of these right here. But besides that, it's a pretty nice little billet piece. It looks really good, actually. And I love the pink set screw. That's cool. Now I just want to show y'all real quick, the gear that I'm actually referring to is this little piece right here. So as well, we have the Skunk 2 intake manifold. Now this is not billet. You can tell by the side of it that it's cast. And then they milled down all the surfaces. And it looks like they actually did a pretty good job on not having warpage on this one. So that's really good. But because typically a lot of people on these Skunk 2 intake manifolds will have warpage, but this one looks fairly straight. Doesn't look like it has any warpage or anything like that. But it's a really nice intake manifold. It's gonna have a lot more volume than your stock one, obviously. It's gonna have a lot more volume than your stock one. So these right here are gonna be for like these back plate holes right here, if I can get it to focus right here, is going to be for fittings that you can run vacuum lines and stuff too. So that's really good. They have them on front and back. That's awesome. Besides that, I want to clean the surface down before we install it. And I just want to let you know that if I'm not mistaken, bottom bolts are 96 and 97 and the top are NAs, and I believe the top bolts would be NBs. I could be mistaken, but I'll double check on that. But just so you know, that is why it has multiple holes, because this intake manifold will fit the NB and NA. And it's really nice, that they did a good job milling down all the surfaces and everything like that, except for like right here in the center, but I'm not worried about that. It's cast. But on the inside, it does actually look really nice. So with the throttle body and intake manifold, we're obviously going to be increasing quite a bit of air. I mean, I'm sure you've seen it in the last video, but as well, I have an AFR gauge installed right there. Now, the reason I've had this intake and throttle body for so long, for months, and haven't installed it, is because I needed an ECU. My AFR is already mid-14s, and I do not want to be higher than that. I actually want to go down to about 13.8 to 13.2. It really depends on RPM and everything like that. But anyways, with a lot of this extra air, you're still going to be able to run stock injectors. If you're running this intake and throttle body with a Mega Squirt, you can go ahead and keep running stock injectors. Stock fuel pump, but I will tell you right now, very soon you're going to be maxing it out. But you're going to have an AFR gauge as well as a wideband sensor powering that AFR gauge in order to actually be able to utilize this. Now today we do have an MS Pro 2, nice little unit right here. And what we're going to be doing with that is basically we're going to start it with a base tune. We're going to check AFR, make sure everything in terms of air to fuel ratios and everything like that are not too lean. Now, if you're a little rich at the beginning on a crank and, say you're at 12 to 13 AFR, that's perfectly fine. You could always tweak that conversion table. But I will say you do not want to run lean at all. If you start getting into the 15.5 area, you need to calm down. And that's the reason I have gotten this ECU before I installed my intake and throttle body, is because of the simple fact that my AFR does typically sit around anywhere from 13.8 to 15.4. Depends on what I'm doing and how it's driving. So you want to make sure that your fuel is adequate for the air you're adding. When you're adding a throttle body that is 7mm over stock size, and you're adding an intake manifold as well that doesn't have block channels on the pluming on the inside, so you actually have more free flow going into in each individual cylinder, so you don't have any blockage or anything like that, and you have a finer millet on the inside, so you're not going to have any vortexing or anything. So it's going to be a lot higher flowing. And when it comes to an ECU, intake and throttle body, keeping it naturally aspirated in A, you may think it's not going to be too much power, but on a little a little Miata like this with the ISR exhaust, racing beat mid pipe that we have and everything, it is going to be bumping up that power about 30 horsepower, give or take 25 to 35, really depends on how you do it. But everything right here is 100% worth the money if you want to make your NA Miata faster. Some tubing and stuff, you have some A&F fittings and stuff like that for vac lines and stuff. You have your sticker, and you have this gasket. I don't suggest using that gasket. I've heard very bad things about that gasket. As well, we just got our Spectre breather filter, which is basically, in my opinion, is a fail-safe. Basically, if you see oil on this filter, you know you have too much crankcase pressure. So, in my opinion, that's a good fail-safe right there. So the MS Pro 2 as well does come with a plug that you can build yourself for doing certain modifications to the ECU and everything like that. And we're going to handle that later. But what I believe this is a USB, and I believe this has the base map loaded on it and the actual software itself. So that's awesome. Megasquirt also does provide you a tee-off so that if you would like to run AT on a vacuum line, most certainly you can do that. As well as it does come with your stock base tune cable, so that's awesome. So essentially how you're going to be running it, your 9697 ECU is actually behind the seat, and we'll get into that to a second, but your both plugs I believe should go on the outside and outside. This, I don't know if I'll be drilling holes into the body and mounting it, but we'll get there when we get there. This right here is what this is for. This is your vacuum line, which is also why they have the tee off. You have to run a vacuum line from your car to the back of this Megasquirt to provide a vacuum. Alrighty, ladies and gentlemen, so this is what we're going to be doing. So we already have, and y'all saw in the past video that we have the charcoal canister and the windshield wiper fluid reservoir deleted. Now, in my opinion, you are going to need both of those, and I'm going to tell you exactly why you need them both removed. Charcoal canister you have to have removed because the Skunk 2 is actually going to sit about right here, so it pushes out about 3 inches. Well, also the overflow on the coolant, I'm going to be relocating that and running lines back to that back left corner, because when we go to push this out, I'm going to have to do a lot of different work. We're going to have to basically your stock map sensor or intake air temp sensor, intake air temperature sensor right here, which is in a stock location. You can't run that on turbo side. Well, I'm still going to stay naturally aspirated, so I will retain that stock location, but I will have to redo this entire piping right here. As well, this is the vac line that we're going to be replacing with the breather filter. But basically, it's not too bad. So what I'll do is I'll rerun my filter and keep it on the cold side of the motor right here. And then that'll give me a spot to move my reservoir for overflow coolant back there. And we'll have my intake filter right here for now. Then, when we come to the turbo side, once you actually have a turbo in it, you'll have to have that intake air temp sense right here, coming off of this throttle body. You don't want it too close to the turbo because it's going to be too much exhaust heat, and it's obviously going to overheat. So basically, just to explain realistically what you got to do here, there's actually 4 bolts on the front of the throttle body. You got one here, one here, one here, and then you got 2 more down below in the exact same position. I believe those are 10 millimeter if I'm not mistaken. So basically, first things, you're going to take off your throttle cable. From there, you're going to go ahead and take off all of your intake piping, and every single bit of your intake piping will be removed. After that, you do have a coolant line that does carry coolant, which I believe is at the bottom of the throttle body, and it does carry coolant to the front of the block right here. So you will have to be careful. If you need to put a pan down, do that. You'll have to run a rubber cap in order to actually cap the block side of things while you finish up everything right here. So, and then besides that, basically you don't, if I'm not mistaken, the fuel rail is going to have to come off as well, which you got a bolt for each, right here, 1, 2, I think there's actually 2, I was about to say 3, but it looks like there's 2 bolts. And then a lot of these vacuum lines will be coming off. As you can see, I already have these capped from where I removed the charcoal canister. But a lot of these vac lines will be coming off. Intake manifold, if I'm not mistaken, has 8 bolts on it, 4 top, 4 bottom. And it is a pretty rough spot to get to. For that backside bolt, you're going to need an S wrench in order to be able to get down and into it. So that's one tool that you're going to need for sure for that. But besides that, that's pretty much it. Basically, since I'm staying in A for now, I'm going to redo this piping right here. So that way I can fit it to a 64 millimeter throttle body, because that 57 is not going to fit the 64. I'll leave my stock intake location and intake air temp sensor. And then the Skunk 2 will push it out, so you have to have, like I said, the charcoal canister and windshield wiper fluid reservoir removed. and then that'll push it out. Your AC lines and everything should be fine, but that'll push it out. And when you push it out, your throttle body cable should be, or your throttle cable should be good. If I'm not mistaken, you should be able to just jimmy it over just a hair, and it should line up to the Skunk 2. But as well, besides that, realistically, there's not too much hardware that you're going to be removing. A lot of these back lines, you're going to be rerunning to the Skunk 2 on those 2 bolts and 2 bolt holes that I had showed you. And you can see where it's clamped, so be careful when you reclamp this down. Make sure that this portion of the clamp right here sits in that same spot so that you don't have any cracking or wearing around the rubber pieces. Hey! We got her out. But I will say though that looking at the valve cover painted with the head and throttle body open, that looks really cool. Now at this point in time, we're going to go ahead and start pulling the throttle body off of the car. And let's see if I can find this coolant line that was being referred to earlier. Oh, it's this line right here. So this line right here that I'm holding, right behind this radiator line, is the one that's going to be coolant, if I'm not mistaken, that runs down to the bolt. No? Okay, it actually T-splices into the radiator on the front of the head. Yeah, so this is going to be that coolant line that I'm moving right there. Come right there onto the, if I can get it to focus. I got my thumb right here onto the clip, and then I just use a screwdriver to kind of wedge it out. So you're going to have to get your thumb in on that clip. And then you just get a screwdriver on the edge of it, like right here, with your thumb on the clip, and just kind of wedge it out. But yeah, it's hard up in there. This is your stock. You had your connects, boom, boom, and boom. So it's going to be fairly simple. You're just going to run boom, boom, and boom. So the stock ECU actually has 2 different brackets. The one on the left lines up to those 2 bolt holes, which had the original ground, and then there's one on the right that goes over to that bolt. And we took the right one off, and my dad bent it with a hammer. It did have an L in it, 90 degree. We bent it, and we put a rivet through it because we didn't have a bolt the perfect size. But this will give you a ground if you're needing to do it at home and you don't want to have to go spend any money on hardware or anything like that. Just do that, and you can bolt it to that, put the ground on it, and we'll get it to bolt up. We'll have tape on the backside of it to keep it snug on there. But we'll get all the plugs plugged in, and then we'll get our cables ran, and we should be good on the ECU part for right now on that. So somehow my key broke, I guess, trying to open the glove box, and I didn't notice, but it cracked through. I'm gonna have to go get another key made because it completely twisted it. I had to put it in my trunk and turn it the wrong way to get it bent back. So I'm gonna go get a new key made, and then we'll be back to test everything. So we ended up getting the fuel rail off. We got all those bolts loosened. We got the fuel rail out. We got all of the emission stuff removed. Currently working on removing the exhaust heat shield right there. And then we should be able to pull this intake manifold off once we get the EGR valve unconnected on the backside. Oh, hey. We actually did miss one bolt right here. We got the bolts off the manifold. We got the fuel rail out. We're working on getting the heat shield off so we can pull the EGR valve out, and then we'll be ready to take the manifold off. I just want to show y'all real quick. Oh my gosh, that thing is past its time, son.
Why do you need to take the sending unit off and the oil pressure or the oil filter?
Because they are in the way. So in order to get these bottom bolts with the new one on, you have to remove those to get to it. We can here.
And then you have to do it from the bottom.
Yeah, correct.
These 3 bolts right here are going to be for the fuel rail. You have to remove those. And then there is going to be the fuel pressure regulator, which comes underneath the intake manifold to these hard lines right here. Cap those, and then basically you go up top, loosen those, and you can actually take this off completely without lowering or raising the car. But these bolts are a little tricky to get to. Besides that, that's where we're at. Got the heat shield off. EGR valve's bent. We're going to delete that either way. But yeah, as of right now, it's off. So a lot of different things. We had to bend this fuel rail return up and get them over the intake for now until we get a new rail. Run those down to your lines. Had the new PVC down to here. Brake booster line down to the rear. And you got the fill in, which we ended up just removing this whole extra vacuum. Got all the injectors plugged in and everything. Got some cheap AutoZone intake tubing. We had to bend it to get it over this piping. But besides that, everything should be okay. Currently making an EGR block off plate. He went ahead, and I'm not gonna be able to really show it, but you see that block off plate, he went ahead and got made up. That should be good to go there. Got the TPS and everything, got the throttle cable readjusted. It's pretty good there. Also, trying to think of what else. The broke injector we had, we went ahead and zip tied that so that won't wiggle out. No longer need that IAC plug. But everything's coming together real quick, guys. I'm sorry that I didn't get no actual footage of this, but just trying to get it done, so I appreciate y'all and much love. Okay, I'll do a little third